at the park. His mother and father ran the gift shop, which was a very popular place back then. So my first encounter of Mammoth Cave was not very pleasant. So as time went on, I, like a lot of students today, encountered Mammoth Cave as a student. We came over on school trips. We went in the cave, we went to the river. That continues on even today. I can remember, and I'm thinking that it was somewhere around 1974. My wife and I brought our firstborn, our son, to Mammoth Cave. And I remember doing the historic trip. I'm a teacher, a school teacher. I had been teaching started in 1969, so I had been teaching probably about 4 years. I had just completed my master's, so my summers were somewhat available. And I told her, I said, wouldn't this be a great summer job? So in 1976, I applied. I was actually turned down. They couldn't find a position for me. So in 1977, I applied again. Turned down again. But had a stroke of luck. There was some people that had decided not to come back to work. And Lewis Cutliff, who was in charge of hiring, he called me and probably had a little bit of help, because I, like a lot of people that started out in that period of time, had a friend or a connection. And the core of seasonal help, starting in the 1970s and even in the early 60s, were school teachers. Had the summer off. It's kind of like a local park. They came from a lot of this area. And so a connection through a connection helped me get on in 1977.
Yeah, I've heard that, a little bit of that story. Sometimes about connections, I do hear it about trying over and over again.
Sure.
About military service having some kind
Absolutely.
But everyone's story is a little different. So when you first came on, what was your first job? And do you remember what that first week was, that first experience was like?
Oh, I do. Like we do now, we had training. When I was a little bit different then than it is now. We had training, and we have training today. But I can remember that when I walked in and sat through training, I thought, what am I doing here? I don't know that I really want to do this, because they were presenting me in ways that I thought, I teach all year, I deal with people all year, do I really want to do this? So, my first year, I had only 2 trips. I had either the morning, what they call the half-a-day trip, and a frozen, or I had the afternoon half-a-day trip or a frozen. So for one solid summer, 5 days a week, I had only 2 trips. So either they were sending me a message, we're going to run you off, or we're going to see if you really want to do it. I fell in love with it. I enjoyed the people that I worked with. It was a great experience. It enhanced my teaching because of the diversity of people that I carried on a cave tour. I still do. But as I look back, that first few years was a challenge, because I was balancing teaching. I was a coach. I had all-star games to coach in. I was working here during the day, driving to another part of Kentucky, and then coming back because they wouldn't let me miss. You didn't miss when you first started. And so it was a really, plus building a house in 1977. a challenge, but I never thought that I would be here in 2014 carrying on an interview with you, but it's been very good.
So there's been a thread. One of the threads with your colleagues has been has this been an educator, a teacher or an educator, and doing this, and then some people, even Joe Duvall or something, might move here from away for a while and then settle down here. What are those connections? Are they as simple as I might think, or what do you bring as a teacher? What are the connections between that and doing interpretation here?
Well, yeah, great. And, you know, in all of it, you're doing what? You have to communicate. And you're talking, you're expressing yourself, you're organizing, and it goes hand in hand. Each makes the other better. And some of the best interpreters, not just at Mammoth Cave, although I'll tell you, I'm somewhat partial. I think the best interpreters are at Mammoth Cave because we do it every day. But some of the best interpreters that I have ever been with in any aspects of the National Park System have been teachers, because they have that built-in knack of communicating. And your message is only, you might say, as good as you can get it over to the people. And it's we now have people that are coming here that are still in school, maybe more so now than they were back then, because most people were already out. But teachers, prospective teachers, you can see how they grow. And they've left here and made outstanding educators.
So it could go either way. You have this gift for communication. You start out as an interpreter, then you go into an elementary or secondary or what have you, or you're a teacher and you love this communication. And
well, yeah, it does. It's kind of meshes together. It's a continuation of teaching. One of the greatest compliments, now I'm a retired teacher now, have been so since 2001. So I can tell you right now, and the dialogue that I have with my visitors, and they ask me how long I've been here, and I say, well, now I've been here my whole life, but I'm not as a permanent, I'm a retired educator. And I'll tell you, one of the greatest compliments that people give me is when they walk out and we shake hands and they like the trip and they say, you know, you're still educating. Or I bet your students enjoyed you as a teacher. Because, see, we're still teaching, but we're teaching a different clientele. And school groups that come in still enjoy the school groups. Also, they can get kind of hairy sometimes, there's no question. But
how so?
You've got 100 students in a big old cave, and sometimes their voice tends to carry, and it's a kind of a vacation to them. We have to roll it into a educational classroom. As a former teacher, it's easier to do than people that has never dealt with it. So Mammoth Cave, when you look back to the history, some of the best friends I met at Mammoth Cave, because we had a common bond. We were teachers first. We became cave guides, and of the group of people that I started out with, only 2 are left. Now that tells me I'm getting older, but maybe everybody didn't look at it. In my time here, from 1977 to present, I was here through 1988. I had a change in school responsibility, and then I backed off. But I also backed off because I was fortunate enough that my son was hired, the one that was a young child that I brought to Mammoth Cave. He was here for about 4 years. Spanned lapse of 1 year. And then, fortunate enough again, my daughter came here. And she guided here through her college days as my son did. And then she stayed off a year, and then I came back. So in the 90s, I backed away to allow my son and daughter to work here, and I can tell you they're both have excelled in their careers, and they both have to get up before people and speak, and their start came from Mammoth Cave National Park. And may I add is that I am fortunate enough that as I close out my career at Mammoth Cave, I'm able to do that and share that with my son's daughter, my granddaughter, who is now a park guide, seasonal, and she is to be a teacher. So it's a great circle. And 3 generations of Steenbergens since 1977. And if you cannot detect the sense of pride that I have in that, then it's there. And I attribute it all to Mammoth Cave National Park.
Yeah.
And the people that's hired me, and it's hired my son and daughter, and it's hired my granddaughter. It's given them an opportunity, and I see it in them how they've excelled, but I see it in doctors, lawyers, superintendents, people that excelled in their profession where they get their start. Mammoth Cave National Park. Why? Because they can communicate with people.
You came as a teacher, so you were somewhat of a practiced communicator and educator.
Mm-hmm.
Those first days when you're learning how to do the cave talk, is there a mentorship kind of aspect to it? Are there people that you can tell me about, or maybe a story about how I learned such and such from them, and you don't have to name names, or how maybe you developed your own style over time? Can you speak to that?
Well, I can tell you that we train people better, different today than when I started out. See, I came in, and I'm so thankful that I did. I came in on the wave of people that actually started in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. So I can tell you right now, the first time that I guided a cave tour, not by choice, I was with, and I know exactly, I'll tell you, Jack Borden, rest his soul, and Don Webb, who still lives, is a great friend of mine. 3 of us were together. Old green guide like me didn't know any better, and I was the last one. They were the front 2, and they walked up and turned to the crowd and said, "I'd like to introduce," this was before 160 people now, "I'd like to introduce your guide." They walked into the cave, and there I stood. So my first time I guided a group of people in the cave was kind of like the old way to learn to swim. Pitch yourself in the creek. You either swim or you drown. Well, I was going to either talk or drown. And that was my first experience as a cave guide, and here I am.
Was that a bit of a ritual kind of, every occupation?
Yeah. Listen, it was a hardcore group of people. A lot of love, a lot of fun, a lot of friendship. But you better be able to take a joke.
Right.
It was just a great bunch. We all had something in common. We were teachers. We were local people. We had a little bit of connection to the cave. We could talk about things in the past. And I have been very fortunate to have been around people that knew the surface, the history, better than we do today because they lived it. So I've benefited from many generations of working here at Mammoth Cave. And I know when I leave, when Joe Duval leaves, when Kevin Neff leaves, I know when we leave, we're going to leave behind what we know existed because we lived it, and nobody else on the guide force will be able to say that.
How is it done today? How is the training different? I mean, just
I think the training is better. I think we prepare people better. Guiding today as compared to back when I first started, I don't want to say it's more factual, but it's more content oriented. Back then, visitors had a lot of fun. That's what they used to do. You wanted to laugh and have a good time, and we did that. And now it's more content organized. It's a lot more factual. I think it's great to blend the two together. You can have the content and you can tell it as factual and truthful it is, but also to bring the past into the present, I think is a very effective way. And the new people tend to learn to do that by going with older, more seasoned guides. We have a great group of people on our guide force today, and people that helps younger people. And I think that's one of the, anytime you can take a young person and blend in with old seasonals that think they're young, not only do we talk about what's going on in the cave, but maybe some life stories that will benefit them down the road as well. That's one of the great things that I have seen that of my son and my daughter, and now my granddaughter. They will tell you they learned so much from Mammoth Cave, but they learned a whole lot more from the people they worked with. And I think you can contribute that back to the Lewis Cutlets and the Joe McGowans and the Don Rogers and the Rachel Wilson and Joy Lyons. How can you not talk about Joy Lyons when, you know, she came here and she lived her dream, she became what she wanted to be, and she was in charge, and she has set the way we guide today because she became more factual. And Kathy Prophet today is taking and going and moving the boat right down the stream without any hesitation of the paddle at all. And when you look back at the many superintendents that I've worked under, but we meet the public first. We're the ones that has to have the smile, the neat uniform, and there's ways to do it and there's ways not to do it. But the people that has been over us, I think have been very, very beneficial to how Mammoth Cave serves the public today. And I think we do it. May I say I'm partial, but I think we do it as well. Because everything we do, you have to have somebody to guide you through. You can't take an audio and a cassette, and you can't get a VIP. It's got to be by guide to show. So you have to interpret. And I've often told young people, what Mammoth Cave will do to you is that you don't know yet. Is that when you go in to sit down to do an interview, you can't text. You have to verbally be able to look the person in the eyes and talk to them. And that's what Mammoth Cave does to people right now. But you got to earn it. That's what it does. And that's what's been one of the special things about it. The cave is obvious. It's a natural geological wonder that's nowhere else in the world like it. Obvious. But the ingredients that go with the position, you don't know about it until you're long gone.
one of the greatest things about me doing this project is I get to learn from all of you, and thinking about how to classify what a ranger is, and learning about this idea that was presented to me by several, but initially the word David Spence talked about, I'm part of the guide force. It was one of my earlier interviews, and I thought, oh, guide force. So what does that mean to you? Or what does that, is it, do you, are you a ranger and a guide? How is the guide force a special thing? Was that used back in the old days? Is that a new?
Well, I'm a cave guide. It can be interpretive division. We've been called rangers. We've been called. I'm a cave guide, And we talk to people. But the guide force are people that are in our domain. They're in our locker space. These are people we share not only jobs with, but we console, we help, we talk. The guide force means more than just a job. And even as a teacher, you had that, but I can tell you the guide force over my time since the 70s has had it more. And it is an intangible that you can't see. It just exists. Once a guide, I'll give you an idea. Had a guy that used to work here, and he was somewhere and saw the gray and green walk by, and he had to stop and talk about, you work at Mammoth Cave? Do you guide at Mammoth Cave? What? Wanted to know how things were because of the gray and the green. And a lot of the local people that are around here now that were such a big influence on me have become very aged. Many are deceased. And even the families still recognize and talk about the gray and the green and the Mammoth Cave and what it meant to their families. So there is but I was interviewed a couple of years ago when we had a superintendent change. And Mary came and wanted to talk to me. And I told her the success of our superintendent, and a lot of people don't understand this, is to recognize this is a local national park. Because what goes on outside the boundaries affects it so much on inside the boundaries, because so many people that were dispersed and had to leave still have family around that has great ties to the national park. And in those ties, people have guided here over the years. So it's a local national park, and that gets right smack dab of the past history getting into your guide force. And so there is, even though they're gone and not many are left, they still attach themselves to the guide force at Mammoth Cave.
After people retire from here, whether they're interpreters or management, do they still keep connected, or are they included in different kinds of things?
We have a reunion every 5 years, a guide reunion. Joe Duval is a big part of that. It's very well attended. People that have gone on, that left here and gone, are superintendents at other national parks that were basically guides here. We have that. Although they know, do they come back? Not very often. Not very often. Because once your family changes, the memories are there, but you don't come back much. And that's a lot the case as it is today. When I retire, I'll come back initially. I won't make it a habit, but I know it's there, if that makes sense. And so, to your question, we have a breakfast every Christmas. We have people to come in that were here in the 30s. That worked here or just started 5 years ago. We do keep in contact, but not as it was when the family was together.
What's the most meaningful part of your job today, or maybe it's evolved over time? Maybe it's satisfaction that you get, or
Meaningful satisfaction. When I first started, I'll be honest with you, I did it because I needed the money. I was a teacher. I was coaching, but I still was able to work in the summers. I used to be a ranger at the Corps of Engineers. I did that for 2 years. Finished up my master's, and I needed the money. I had kids to get through school, house payment. So it was money. And that carried on, still money. Then in 1988, after I completed, I had school responsibility changed, and I left not knowing that I would ever be back. I thought I was done. But I did encourage my son to apply and my daughter, because by 1988, I had recognized that it was such a meaningful job. It helps you in so many ways. As I chose to end my teaching career after 32 years, I thought, what am I going to do? So I called Joy. I said, Joy, I'd like to come back. She said, it's changed. And I said, I know that it's changed. So I came back a summer to see, really a summer before I retired, to see if I really liked to come back. And I did. It took me a while to get used to it because I'd been away for a decade.
you started doing a little guiding? And
I came back a summer and guided. And I recognized, I think this is something that that I could do to close out my career. That was in 2000, and this is 2014. So now the second tenure is a lot different than the first tenure. Money driven. Now the satisfaction of talking to people from various parts of the country. Satisfaction of helping a young person start their career. Satisfaction of knowing that this is probably the last job that I will have, and it's physically and mentally good for you. It's many things, but the job itself is a reward to me, not only to please a visitor, but to help somebody in our guide force. And that's very satisfying to me. And I'm not going to lie at all. Watching my granddaughter mature is not bad either.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have any stories from your guiding time that you might share with me? Just something that maybe it's a meaningful or a satisfaction or an episode that happened, or maybe it's something that was frightening, or I'm glad I made it out of that situation. Or
Yeah, if you stay here long enough, you're always going to have situations. And I remember Ronald Reagan coming here in 1984, a highlight. I remember a guide was on a bicycle during that period of time, and his tire blew out, and Secret Service surrounded him. I remember all the people lined up, because that's the only president that's ever visited this national park. And I remember that like it was yesterday. Also remember a sad note, and that was Labor Day weekend of 1978. I think I'm correct, 78. The last trip before I was shutting down and full-time teaching. We had just completed a short trip, and a lady was there, and I asked her, I said, ma'am, do you not want to go down the steps? She said, no, I'd rather not. And I opened the gate, she walked through, I closed the gate, and she fell, and she was dead immediately. And that death in the cave because that was my last day, and I didn't come back to work until the next summer. Lingered with me quite some time. And I remember that. I can even walk by that even today. And it's been, my goodness, 35 years ago, just about. And I can still see that instance. So many, watching a young person guide their first trip, and how the people responds and the smile on their face. It's very satisfying to me, especially if you had anything to do with maybe molding that person or helping that person. Watching the old visitor center being demolished and building of the new visitor center and the exhibits. And as a Kentuckian, forget about employee, but as a Kentuckian and a local Kentuckian, was a great sense of pride for me.
Yeah.
Because I had been to other national parks and we were really behind time. So that was, it just, as a local person, a sad part was when the old hotel was torn down. I was here. And to see how that historical building was torn down by a decision away from here is still a sore spot for a lot of locals. Those are things that I never forget. But highlights, the main highlights come from the visitors. The visitors that you talk to and the many people throughout this world that you exchange, families. I'm Dutch. People from the Netherlands, come on over and see me. The people that you talk to, the cave is the same. It's a geological wonder. The rock right there I've seen time and time again. But the people that you take through, it's always different. It makes every trip different. So those are always highlights, and you never know when the unexpected is around the corner, whether good or whether bad.
Did it change the park after it got this World Heritage designation?
It did. It put us more on the limelight. People recognized it. People identified that. Negatively and positively. Positively, yes, because it's one of a few in our country. Negatively, because they thought it was attached to another organization that they weren't in favor of. So as it first got started, not an issue now, but as it first got started, yeah, you had good and bad. Any time that you can get any good ink about this place, it's a plus. And it makes it more of a worldwide. I told a group of people this morning, I said, we're the local national park, we're Kentucky's national park, we're this country's national park system, but we're also a worldwide park because people all over the world come to see us. And just to talk and relay stories and experiences of life through them, it's very, very satisfying. But you can do all that, you can talk about all that, but it's the relationships with your co-workers over the years that's still one of the satisfying. Visitors, yes, absolutely, but the co-workers, it's different than teaching. The co-workers.
The guide lounge is different than a teacher's lounge.
No question. No question at all. And that's a little bit more liberty. We're not judged by age. We can be just as big a kid as somebody at 21, and very satisfying.
When you spoke of your kid being proud that your kids had the chance to be able to do some interpretation too. Family vacations, were you drawn to parks in other parts of the country, or did you have time to do vacations when you were?
No, worked every summer. Tried to get in short vacations. Sometimes our vacations came, it couldn't come during the school year because I was coaching and, athletic director, administration, so I was tied up a lot. But we still tried to get in short vacations. We took a couple of long vacations. I guess that's the reason why I tried to take my grandkids on as many vacations as we can. Because it's just different as a working mom and dad and trying to go through school and get them through school, and you have an opportunity to have a job like this. There are sacrifices, no question. Family is one of them, but the positives outweigh the negatives. And by me being here, by Lewis Cutler hiring me in 1977, it opened the door of what was down the road that I didn't know. And after my son worked here, then my daughter worked here, I could see how it enhanced them, how I've seen other people mature and mold into their professions. We've had outstanding people that are in other professions that got their start in Mammoth Cave. And they all have to be able to talk. Verbally talk. And that's, I don't care if it's in a marriage, a job, going to, what you got to be able to communicate. And what better place to communicate is in natural geological wonders with a group of people. It's just, it's been good.
One of the things that I've been asking people is if somebody is coming up to you, and you've kind of answered this already, but if somebody's coming up younger and wants to do this ranger job, what advice do you give them? You've mentioned communicating, those skills, but are there other little tips that the kids, younger folks coming up today might want to be thinking about?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's more difficult now to get in the national park system than it was in 1977. And you can talk about, lack of money, many different reasons for that. Young people that get in and they fall in love with Mammoth Cave, they want to have a career in the national park system. And I said, that's good, but you're not gonna get it here. You've got to, and you go talk to them, they'll say what I say, resume. Send them out. You got to do that. And we've got people that I have been involved with that are all over the country now, and they probably would tell you, resume. But the difficulty of getting in, I think, I look at it as a negative. The jobs are not there, but is that not the case in all professions? Selective ones get in, take advantage, learn from it. You're probably not going to have a career in interp. Now, other aspects of the national park system, maybe yes, but interpretation, that's one of the fields that's reducing because of the VIPs, cutting trips, cutting personnel, budget restraints. Sad part of it, that a lot of people are not going to have that opportunity. But take advantage of it. Learn from your peers. Communicate. Use this as a stepping stone of whatever else you're going to do in life. And it's a great tool. It's a great tool.
Mm-hmm. What else would you like to be able to tell me? Thinking about coming here and talking to me, is there anything else? You've got across a lot of great information and very personal, thoughtful things. Anything about the working lives with some of these people? You've mentioned it. I think you were alluding to Joe Duval and Kevin Neff as being a couple of your.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people come and go. And I've seen a lot of people that left that weren't ready to go. We've had a lot of death in the guide force. We've had a lot of people, the best friend that I ever had was a Mammoth Cave guide and a former teacher. His name was Jeff Foster. Best friend I ever had. Died unexpectedly from a heart attack. Healthy, we thought. We just had another death. It'll be a year this July in our guide force. When you stay around long, and I'll be approaching 30 years, 30 seasons. When you stay around, then obviously there's going to be people that are going to be deceased, are going to leave, or they're going to have illnesses, they're going to have tragedy, and I could just go down the list and name. I feel very blessed and fortunate that I'm here able to still talk to you today. And when you look back at that and you take the little bits and pieces of the people that you've been around and mold them in, it's helped shape my life. I'm not going to lie to you. Because we learn from people. And I have been very fortunate here at Mammoth Cave. We're separating teaching now. Here at Mammoth Cave, I've been very fortunate to be around some of the best. And not as much now as it was back then, but from all corners of our country. We say local, but there still were people that from other areas of our country that came and actually worked here as well. And then some stayed here, but some moved on as well. But we learned from each other, and it's been an education. It's been a good education. And I only hope that I've given back a little bit of what I have received. And Mammoth Cave has done that to me. It's been very good to my family. And it's provided a foundation for their success. And I might also add, I hope she might get mad, my daughter-in-law also worked at Mammoth Cave and tickets. That's my son's wife today. So if I've been able to give back to other people to what it has given to me, then it's very satisfying and been very blessed.
So Bobby, we were talking a little bit about the trip, the Gothic trip, and can you tell us a little bit about that particular tour and why you like it and a story about it?
Yeah. I think I had said in some course of our discussion that, around the corner, you never know what's going to be around the corner. It could be good, it could be bad, and actually my partner that night was Joe Duval. Joe Duval and I had the night trip, which was the Star Chamber trip. And I was at the information desk, and a young couple came up to the desk. They live in Central Ohio. And something that I wish my family had done. Her grandmother, as she was approaching her deathbed, she took a cassette and recorded her history of her family as far back as she could remember. And so they were driving, they had the cassettes, and they were driving down I-75. I'm assuming somewhere, maybe Lexington and going down, I'm not sure. But plug in the cassette and they were listening. Plug in another cassette, they were listening. All of a sudden, Mammoth Cave came up. And her grandmother started talking about, and I can't recall whether it was the grandmother's uncle or grandfather or great-grandfather, but one of the two. But they were talking, and she said, now supposedly I had a uncle or grandfather that worked at Mammoth Cave and was a carpenter at the old hotel. And it's been rumored, I don't know whether there's any truth to it or not, but it's been rumored that he somewhere wrote his name in Mammoth Cave. So the couple came, they said, well, let's go to Mammoth Cave. So they veered right off I-75 and they came right to the park. She walked into the information desk. I happened to be there. And she told me that story. And she said, have you ever seen the name George A. Tapscott? And I looked at her and I said, I have. And I said, what are you doing tonight? Would you like to join us on a trip? I can present that signature to you. So she went with us, and we went right up into Gothic Avenue, sat right on the benches, and I told the group, I said, I have somebody that would like to talk to you, and they're going to tell you about a real life experience. And so she did, and I can see her right now standing on a little bit of the slope as the benches were to her left. And she told that story, and she said his name was George A. Tapscott. And everybody looked up and said, there it is, there it is. It was right above the ceiling, right at the ceiling, right to the by the benches. And from that signature, then we've been able to kind of mesh together that, yeah, the guides actually took the piece of paper and had the visitor to write the name, and the guides put that up there because they misspelled Tapscott. It was Tapsot. Then you look to the left and they corrected it on the side and much smaller after they were tired by holding that stick and candle up so long. So that was a great story. And I tell that every time I go in, and always the expression on people's faces are, you're kidding me. And they say, there it is. Because I asked them, I said, you know, George A. Tapscott was the name, and they've already seen that up there because they looked up in big long letters all the way across the ceiling of Gothic Avenue.
How satisfying for you?
Great, great, because we can tie some things together of things that we thought, but we can tie it together. Plus, it's a real life experience. And I think it was so neat. I had a grandmother and great-grandmother that was living at the same time. I wish I had cassettes of the family of my great-grandmother that went all the way back into the mid-1800s. How neat would that have been? So when you get a real-life experience like that, hey, icing on the cake.
Yeah, and the fact that you loved the signatures and the words, and you knew where that was.
Absolutely. I knew exactly where it was, and I've seen it in other places of the cave. Now I've looked, and well, there he was again. He did more nailing boards than he did more signing his name in the cave. So yeah, very satisfying, and I feel like the people that I have on a cave tour get a great deal of pleasure out of that as well. And that's what it's all about.